there's misogyny. But it's not just misogyny from white men. It's misogyny from Hispanic men.
Around and find out. You opened the border and let in between 10 and 20 million illegal immigrants. The idea that they thought Americans were going to watch the state wield all of its power, around and find out.
Just the things people are saying, and they're, women are like, go off your birth control, delete your apps.
That white women in this country have to change the way that they interact with the patriarchy.
I think the general theme was Kamala did nothing wrong, but America did.
What's up, guys? Welcome back to the pod. Thank you for giving us that extra week while we were at Hereticon. Bridget Fedesi in the house, who is also at Hereticon, the MC extraordinaire, cracking jokes at all of our expense, but probably no one's expense more than Brian Johnson, the immortal man. That was fun. Thank you for doing that, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. What an exciting time.
I mean, you obviously, listen, this is, maybe Matt, give us some kind of America fireworks flag in the background. This is the election episode.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
Obviously, we had to talk about it. One of the reasons I really wanted Bridget here today, other than the fact that she is just a funny, brilliant gem of a human being, is I noticed that you got in this really interesting dust up with the heterodox people, which we're going to talk about a little bit later, who felt, it was just really insane that you wouldn't vote for the same person they were voting for. Before we get into that, though, I think that we probably just should tee up what happened on Tuesday. And it was just a wild, overwhelming Trump victory. It was a comeback. The man lost the last election, or some would say had it stolen. I don't know if anyone in this chat would say that. He certainly won this last one. We kind of felt it early on in the night. It was... I don't know, you just felt the vibe, right? It just didn't, once those first results started coming in, nothing even changed. I'm not sure what it was. I had a gut feeling, and let's just go through some of the stuff that we saw. So obviously he won the Electoral College, but then he sort of critically won the popular vote. I think psychologically that's really important for the country. It also hasn't happened in 20 years. There were all of these strange anecdotes coming in from around the country. One of the first ones I saw that really shocked me was Miami-Dade. Miami-Dade County hasn't voted for a Republican presidential candidate since 1988. It was plus 11 Trump. You had plus Matt, our producer Matt in the pod, mentioned before the show started, or maybe it was in our Slack, New York City obviously went Kamala, but swung 9 points in Trump's direction. Every single swing state was won by Trump. You saw huge gains among Latinos and black men as well. You saw one of the craziest ones for me was young men 18 to 29 plus 30. There was a 30 point, I think it was a 30 point swing. You had huge gains also in blue states. So no one's going to talk about New Jersey because, went Kamala, but the fact that it came so close, you saw gains all throughout the state in different counties that used to be Biden counties and are now Trump counties. And you just saw a narrow margin. I think it was +4 that Kamala might have taken it by. You saw gains in Virginia. And then there's a story in California. So I'm in Los Angeles right now. The pro-crime DA, Gascon, I think his last name is, was fired. You had
Yep.
Prop 36 pass, which recriminalizes theft, or it makes, once again, theft of merchandise under $950 or something. When you go in and you ransack a store, that's now a felony again. So this is this sort of like make crime illegal again policy passed. I think it was like by 40 points. It was an overwhelming victory up in San Francisco. Mayor Breed fired. Up in Oakland, you had the mayor and the DA both recalled. It was just, it was a massive sort of, around the country route, I would say. The House is now in the balance. It looks like it's going to go Republican. The Senate is in the hands of the Republicans and Donald Trump. And there's a lot to talk about. I think the question for you guys right off the bat is just, how do you see this? Are you seeing this as more of a Trump victory or a loss for Democrats?
It feels like both, I think. Why not both? I think it feels like a Trump victory. Obviously, the popular vote, I agree, is psychologically important for the country, but also for him. I think it makes him see, he was that thing that he wanted so badly in 2016. And it does feel like a loss on the left, because reality really, everything you just ran through is really examples of reality reasserting itself in a way that I've been kind of waiting for in America. But I think it feels like the grown-ups stepped in and were like, okay, enough of all this nonsense. Like, we let you guys say that men could get pregnant and now we're done. Like, all right, we've had enough of this silliness, and we let you guys, loot stores for a while. But it does feel like there's a little bit of a pushback from just it like the silent majority kind of spoke up.
Yeah, Riley, Brandon, what do you guys? You're both in LA. What is your sense of the vibe? I'm here. I happen to be here this week, but not typically. So break it down for me. What is it usually like there? What have people been saying? What is the reaction?
So I live in Glendale, which is a majority. I don't know if it's majority Armenian. It has the largest population of Armenians in the country, and they are on the base side of things. My neighborhood was full of Kamala signs that are all gone today. I saw a tweet like today, which I didn't believe. Somebody's tweeting like, in my community, I can't say that I voted for Kamala because it would be, like I would get, quote unquote canceled.
Oh my God.
I think that the opposite still remains here. Anybody who voted for Trump is not talking about the fact that they voted for Trump. If you just saw today that on Twitter, I saw in my trending section that like Newsom has like convened like policymakers in California preemptively to like fortify California from like the attack on democracy that Trump is ostensibly preparing. So I haven't like gone out to bars since the election. I don't like know what the vibe is, but like my expectation is like this is going to be a sanctuary city from like the actual realignment that is actually happening across.
It's crazy because when you said that Newsom convened policymakers, I assumed he's a smart politician. I assumed it was something along the lines of he read the room and gathered people together and said, hey, if we don't take care of some of these really deranged policy positions, we are at risk of losing the state. And maybe it seems like no. To go off of what Bridget, what you were saying before, in terms of, it seems like the adults are in the room kind of vibe. I had a similar feeling. It's sort of, I think if I had to distill what happened on Tuesday into one piece, obviously Trump is funny and he has his core group of fans who love him and the memes were on point. But I really think that it was a kind of, fuck around and find out type election. It was like you opened the border and let in between 10 and 20 million illegal immigrants. We don't even know that number, first of all. Like, that's crazy, by the way, that you don't know that number. You then paid these people with taxpayer dollars for their rent and their food while Americans were struggling to pay their own rent because of economic policies of yours. Fuck around and find out. America had to watch a biological man beat the shit out of a woman at the Olympics and then was gaslit when we said, hey, this seems off, right? Like, fuck around and find out. There's all the lawfare stuff I was thinking about, like the idea that they thought Americans were going to watch the state wield all of its power against not only the frontrunner opposition candidate, but all of his allies, many of whom, by the way, went to jail, and be more afraid of him than them is delusional. Like, fuck around and find out. There was a whole list of things like that. And I think that you could really say there are these three very, very basic things. It's the border, it's crime, and it's the economy. And I think these are roughly the things that you would term, a part of the social contract, the bare minimum of what you expect from the state. It's why we sacrifice rights to the state. It's why we give them taxpayer dollars. And when you don't take care of those three things, you are breaking your side of the deal. Your government is no longer legitimate. There was a massive rout, and I think it was on those grounds. Republicans probably would be, I think they would be very, they should not think of this as a victory for them. It's a victory for Trump, and it is really an indictment, I think, of the shirking of responsibilities that we've seen for many years. Like, as you said, we're talking about rioting. That was 2020 that began, and it's kind of, this feels like the end of that period of time in American politics to me. I hope.
Yeah, I think if you are to say it's more of a Trump victory than a Democrat loss, what you would look to his strategy. And, I've never been more happy to say I was wrong. When we talked about the podcast campaign strategy for Trump earlier, I had skepticism. I thought this wasn't a reliable voting demographic. It's risky. It may blow up in his face. And instead, it proved to be pretty genius. I mean, like the Zoomer Bros turned out in full force with massive swings to the right, like you mentioned. And it's just an incredible swing. And, we'll get into this topic later, I'm sure, but just the erosion of trust in mainstream media really left the door open for podcasts to sort of fill the void. And, they proved to be far more influential than I thought they'd be. I guess, sorry, Barron, for doubting you. I guess he was sort of the architect of that strategy in his grandpa's ear about that one. But yeah, I guess, like, to quote the title of a previous Solana banger, like, we really are the media now. And that's kind of crazy to think
Did you see Elon say that? He said, I think he might've said, like, you are the media now or something, but it was very Pirate Wires coded. I was like, let's go. The man is reading. He's paying attention. Yeah, I agree. The podcast thing, important. This was the podcast election. This was if you just, and we had that whole chart in our last episode of just the podcast that people had done. Media is fragmented now. We know this, and we can get into it now, but it's totally fragmented. And so you can't just go to the New York Times, which is obviously on your side, and expect them to send out your story. You have to go to all of these different sort of siloed off audiences, Joe Rogan being one of the biggest that Kamala didn't care about. But I wonder if you just counted the number of podcasts and the number of listeners on those podcasts and compared the two Kamala's to Trump's, I wonder what you would see. I think the only thing you could glean from that is, like, of course Trump won. He worked harder. That's another piece of this story that maybe is not, it's kind of ignored. And this happened during the Hillary campaign as well, where Trump just works. He really does work a lot. He's touring. He's hitting every single location. He's talking to everybody. He's dipping in from, like, a rally over in wherever the hell in Pennsylvania. Then he's going to McDonald's and doing his tour or whatever. Then he's hitting Joe Rogan. And I mean, Kamala had days, I think, like on her birthday, I don't think she did anything. And it just seemed, I don't know. She just didn't want it as much, is my opinion. I still think that about her. I don't think she wants this. I think that she's going to open a restaurant in Napa, and it'll be great. I'm going to go, and that's what she should do. I'm happy for her. Bye.
It's interesting, the podcasting, because it was so siloed. I feel like it did make it hard to tell. A lot of us were like, it feels like Trump is going to win. But I wouldn't be surprised if Kamala did, because I know that I'm in a bubble and I don't know. And I try to pay attention to the other bubbles, but because everything was so stratified, you really couldn't get like a good idea of the pulse. You could get a sense, but I was very much burned in 2022 thinking for sure there would be a red wave, and then was very wrong about that at the midterm. So this time around, I think I was a lot more measured in terms of my confidence and my gut feeling on the temperature of America. And it turns out my gut feeling was right. For really the past 4 years, I've been seeing this trend, but it's all of like that, you know, everybody being so dispersed makes it harder to, I think, be confident in your ability to predict anything.
Yes, I felt the same sense of not knowing going into it, where I really was doubting myself. My gut also was, it seems like, you know, I have all of these friends who voted for Biden who are now voting for Trump. I've traveled a bit throughout the country. I see Trump support everywhere. I was looking at just all the rallies and the enthusiasm, and then certainly what we all feel online, all of the podcasts, everything on X. But then you have you have the New York Times, you have Drudge Report, which is sort of, I mean, used to be the sort of rogue guys, and now they're just totally Trump deranged. They're like the wild version of the mainstream media now, like a little bit edgy, but they are obviously pro Harris, and they're citing polls, which we're going to talk to in a second in our Polymarket segment. But all the polls were a coin toss to slightly leaning towards Kamala, and I thought, man, it was one of our friends, Ryan. Brandon, our friend Ryan, he said, I don't know what's right now, and I'm not going to know, I think, until the election. I don't know. Someone is lying to us. Like we're going to learn a lot when this election happens. And I went in with a giant question mark until really those first few moments when the results started coming in. And then I knew that, the right wing, the Twitter thing, the sort of retardosphere, right? There were a lot of conspiracy theories. There was a lot of made up bullshit. There were a lot of fake celebrity endorsements. There was a lot of weird made up sex scandals. It's a garbage dump, that ecosystem of like newsletters and alternative media sites and X.com and podcasts. But within that garbage, it contains everything. Like it contains all of the garbage and all of the truth. And you have to just be able to navigate that. And in contrast, what you see from the sort of much weaker now mainstream media, that like sort of legacy press, the sort of state voice from the New York Times, NBC, MSNBC, CNN, like all of those people, is not that. It's not the truth. It's a single perspective. It is, I think you could steelman it and say they don't mean to be so biased. They didn't mean to get it wrong. They just were blinded maybe by what they hoped for. But one thing I know for sure is I didn't get the answers from them. I got it from the garbage dump.
I think one of the things that I think you saw, just to continue with the postmortem on the Trump victory, is like when you have these memes going around, like women saying that if a Trump victory is going to basically cancel out women's rights for good, like I think what we saw is like that represents the left basically like running on like narrative messages, like fumes, right? Because like just simply wasn't real.
Yeah.
I asked Perplexity, like, give me a list of times that Trump and Vance denied that they would support a federal abortion ban. And I got like a list of 8 times with, sources from CBS, NBC, like NPR, every place, and it's like, so when you have these narratives that like are actually just substanceless, I think it actually doesn't work. And I think that's what we saw. And I saw this great tweet about this situation where it was basically just like fake, the federal abortion ban. And somebody said, these people don't believe that. They believe that they ought to believe that. And I think that perfectly describes how the left LARPs and what the left LARPs looks like. And I think that doesn't have much power actually in the end. I think that's what we saw with Trump.
I think that's 100% true. I think on the abortion stuff in particular, that was also just interesting, where we were told that was really, really important, and all of the data we've seen since the election indicates that it really, really wasn't. And it makes sense when you break it down, because who really demographically cares about that? It happens to be one of the few demographics that voted for Democrats, which is college educated women. and so it's like you have black women voted overwhelmingly for Harris. So did black men, but just way fewer of them than they did for Biden. Like there was this huge Trump surge. And then you have college educated white women who are voting, and college educated white women really do seem to care about the abortion. But everybody else, I think it's like if you could care about abortion and other things, I always think about, what women's rights, or women's interests, like what is in women's interests. And I feel like, well, the border is like, aren't there women who care about the border? Are there women who care about the economy? Aren't there women who go grocery shopping and realize like everything's really expensive right now and the rent is really expensive and you're not allowed to build housing? And like, if you get mugged outside, you can't get justice. Like, don't women care about that? And it's like, yes, I think a lot of women are just people and they care about these things that people, Americans, care about, is my sense. But we have a woman in the pod today. What is your sense, speaking as a woman right now?
I was joking before the election because I got burned in 2022. It was right after Roe v. Wade. And I thought that people would be very mad about the lockdowns, the draconian. I thought they'd punish their governments for so much of the COVID overreach. And I had to come to terms with the fact that it was, preference bias, and also just on the heels of Roe v. Wade, the whole abortion thing was so, it just was so in the mainstream. And I kept joking, like, bitches love abortions. I was like, never underestimate how much bitches love abortions. But I will say the fact that I could even make that joke, it almost points to just how much resistance to that idea there is. My generation, I think, is the first generation that came. We really were the first sexually liberated generation. I'll be 40. Oh gosh, old. I'm like 45. So I was the first generation, and a lot of us have. It was like drilled into us that was almost part of your identity. Being pro-choice and it wasn't really until my 30s I even knew anyone pro-life. I never had to interrogate that belief. It was installed in me before I really even had a chance to interrogate it at all. And I think the younger generation has a little bit of that, but they're not also having as much sex just from a numbers perspective as we were. So I don't know if it's that important to them from just a practical perspective. But they're also just more like the younger kids are just more engaged in the culture wars in a way that I never was, because they're all on TikTok and they're getting all this stuff. And I actually think they're exposed to more diversity of opinion than even I was as a young person. So I don't know that they're all being like brainwashed in the same way that I was around this topic. And I also think that women that they rely on to be kind of brainwashed have aged out of worrying about that. And we're worried about groceries. We're worried about crime. We're worried about our kids being in a bathroom with a dude or some boy competing against our daughters at sports. The generation that really was very pro-choice and they could rely on to it's like that little I don't know, it's like a trigger that goes off in your brain where you're like, this is all that matters. We got older. It doesn't, and it's not the most important thing anymore.
Abortion was never an issue that was won by the voters. Right. It wasn't a law that was passed. It was decided by a court because there wasn't enough popularity there to do it. So if we're going back to the state pre-Roe, and things have been locked forever since Roe, no other political or cultural issue seems to be like this, where gay stuff and civil rights, like you move on very quickly. Generations move on very quickly and normalize. They sort of upload the new culture, and that's it. And abortion has never been like that. It's always been pretty divided, and we just haven't really thought about it because of Roe. And now it's back, and people I think are kind of ambivalent. I think most people want some degree of protection in like the earlier stage, and then they get confused on the later stage and just don't want to think about it. And when you compound that with the fact that there are states where you just have abortion like rights, like the huge liberal states. You're good to go. You can have all the abortions you want. So what demo are we really talking about now? It's like, I think we're talking about this very small demographic of women who not only, it's college educated white women who not only want abortions in their state, but the freedom to abort in every state. And that's just like, that's not an important, like in terms electorally, that's not an important demographic. It's a very small demographic that didn't, certainly in this election, did not matter.
Yeah, didn't they enshrine it in like 10 more states on this election? So at the state level, it does lose a lot of the time, other than maybe Florida this election cycle, but that people, I think, seem to be okay with it being at the state level, because it generally, if there's any chance of expanding it, it wins. And if you're trying to restrict it, it loses. So this is why I think so many people thought that it would be losing at the federal level in such a powerful message, because it loses for Republicans every time, everywhere. They basically hadn't won anything since Roe v. Wade was overturned.
Yeah. I mean, I think for sure, if you're trying to do like a total ban, it's a loser.
Yeah.
I was going to say that I would love to see like a state by state breakdown of the women who voted for Kamala and whose primary concern was the abortion ban, because my theory there would be that most of them live in states where abortion is like they have the most permissible abortion laws. I don't know if anybody's seen anything to the contrary, but I have the feeling that it was mostly liberal women in liberal states voting along these lines.
Let's talk about, I mean, this is our Polymarket segment. Thank you, Polymarket, for giving us money and supporting the valuable, incredible work that we, Men of Taste, do here for you at Pirate Wires. But this is a special Polymarket segment. We had, I think, one more like this recently. And Polymarket has just been, a big part of the election. And we were going to talk about it regardless, and we have to talk about it regardless, because we really saw this interesting parallel to the election. You had this other contest between ways of learning about what was happening in the election. And there was the polling of it all, which tended to have things a coin toss or lean Kamala, a few times leaning Trump, but Kamala at the end, it was leaning Kamala. And you had the betting markets, which really split about a month ago and never turned back. It was just a Trump train all the way until the night of, and then it was a jump from 69% to 75, 90, and here we are today. In the lead up to the election, Polymarket garnered significant attention as Donald Trump's odds surged. Some Democrats alleged that Republican donors were manipulating the market, a topic our guest John Coogan addressed in the previous episode. It was later revealed that a French trader known as Theo was behind substantial pro-Trump bets on Polymarket. Theo employed unconventional polling methods we learned recently, such as asking individuals who they believed their neighbors would vote for. And as election results began to come in, Polymarket's odds for Trump increased rapidly, outpacing traditional media on state-by-state reporting. In the end, the final electoral map mirrored Polymarket's predictions from October 25th, highlighting the platform's accuracy in forecasting the election outcome. It was really a total victory for them. Like I really thought, and I'd colleagues, so Founders Fund is also invested in Polymarket, which we've talked about here. We talked about it last week because this is how people say that Peter Thiel is, secretly pulling the strings behind everything. And it's this like long, convoluted chain of people that get back to Shane, who's still in charge of his company. But I talked to them about this and I said, it seems this is pretty, if it doesn't play out like you say it is, it seems pretty bad. Like I myself would feel confused about it, and I would have to do some introspection here. There've been a couple things on the markets that have confused me, and this would be a big one because it was such a sharp divide. But in the end, it was Nate Silver's. I think he said I ran 80,000 simulations and 40,000, and 12 of them or something leaned Kamala. He was the one who had a really a pretty. I think, and I like Nate. Feel bad for him. I think he had a pretty rough night on Tuesday. It was a victory for Polymarket.
And he lost to Keith
Dude, pull up
his
the tweet.
$100,000
Matt, pull up the tweet,
on
Matt.
the-
Pull up the
on the
tweet.
Florida. Yeah.
That was first of all, so Keith, there's no way he actually took him up on the bet. Keith is saying, Keith says Florida is going to be won by, I think, 10 to 12 points, but minimum 8, and by Trump. And Nate is just, you're huffing gas. He's reading the polls. He's reading constant polls. He's like, you don't know what you're talking about. I thought Nate was correct. I thought, yeah, Keith doesn't know what he's talking about. Nate, I think, is really misunderstood by a lot of people who think, oh, you mispredicted Hillary versus Trump, you idiot, or whatever. He's a really smart guy. He's a really principled guy. He's a really sober guy. And I was wrong. And Keith was right. And I know he didn't make the bet because that's just not the kind of, I just don't think he did. Correct me if I'm wrong. If anyone knows that, I'm happy to issue a correction here, but I doubt he made the bet. He should have, though. And it was a huge, huge victory for that guy. And again, yeah, bad night for Nate.
One thing I struggle with prediction markets that I've been thinking about a lot since the election is like, of what value? I mean, it's like, what are we supposed to do with a prediction market when, like let's say 4 weeks before the election, right? Because there's a time-based component where it's like, prediction markets aren't actually, they're not going to predict something. They just predict what would happen given all the current information. And if we're, so that's there's a huge function of time here that we never talk about. And so like it's almost like Polymarket every single time is going to resolve to the right outcome, because it's not predicting an outcome. It's just people placing bets on an outcome. Right. So, that's something that I've been sort of perennially sort of confused by with Polymarket, is like, when should I take the prediction most seriously, right? Because there could be a last minute surprise that completely changes everybody's feelings about what's going to happen, even those in the market, and that changes everything. So that's just like one of these things, like I just like kind of don't understand. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, but
I think that we're just going to learn. I mean, there still is a chance that it was a fluke or something, and I don't think so. I think it's just a new part of the information ecosystem, and we have to run it a bunch of times.
Yeah.
We have to just keep looking at it and keep seeing where it's right and where it's wrong, and then assessing why we think it's wrong. The thing that we know for sure has been wrong, a handful of times now, are the polls, and the polls that are probably a part of the problem there is just, the polls that are amplified. But that's where I turn to someone like Nate, who really does do the work. And still, I don't think these results were just not reflected in the polling data. They were not something like this.
Yeah. I mean, they were categorically useless. The 40,000 or the 80,000 simulations, that was a categorically useless observation, I thought. And so I was just like, well, what do we do with this? Like, I understand. I like Nate too. I don't know him personally, but I have a lot of respect for him. But I just couldn't make up or down of what he was saying. It was just like, okay, well, if this is what your model is telling us, then, and then this was the outcome, right? Like a soft blowout. Well, what is the value of the model?
Yeah, I also saw.
The value of the underlying data.
You then see those polls become the backbone of the analysis spread through the press, what's left of the mainstream press. You have like the New York Times Daily on the morning of the election saying, well, it could be a blowout for Trump or for Kamala, or it could be close. You have like truly, they hit all of them in the podcast. It was crazy. I'm like, why would you even publish this? This is bizarre. Like, you could also just not make a prediction. I didn't make a prediction. I don't know what the fuck's going to happen. Democracy is chaos. Anything could happen. I have no idea. I went in like, let's see what's going to happen. But then you had Kara Swisher predicting a blowout for Kamala, and then pivoting pretty quickly. And like, this takes us to our media meltdown segment of the podcast. I
think there's an interpretation here of the MSNBCs and the New York Times, continuing to double down on the election outcome, and it representing that everybody in America is racist and that we all knowingly voted in a fascist and all that, where they're just saving face now and they're going to quietly change their positions over time. And I'm hoping that's what it is. And also, a lot of them are going to be fired. I think, like what's that Joy Ann Reid lady? Like, I don't know.
I agree. I
Wow,
think
she's surprised.
I was watching her. So we're now entering our media meltdown segment. The media
Particularly.
melted down. Long story short,
Yes.
there was a bit of a meltdown. Not everybody melted down. I think there was some sobriety out there. I saw a lot of interesting stuff. There were people like Derek Thompson at The Atlantic. And I mean, I saw lots of just interesting people being thoughtful, as some do after an election. I was surprised by the New York Times, which seemed to become much darker than they were before the election. Tuesday morning was one story, just a sort of muted. I found myself going to the Times a lot this election, looking just for just raw facts. I would always, it was one of my, it still is in my cycle of news sources. It's like X, it's the New York Times, it's Drudge Report, it's Washington Post. I'll check if I really just want to be annoyed about something, and then Threads if I really want to laugh at something, and then usually just what people are sending me in our Slack channel. But Wednesday morning, it was, an authoritarian is rising, and the darkness descends, and these are really scary pictures and headline after headline after headline. And I was surprised by that, and less surprised by the Joy-Ann Reid thing, which, Brandon, if you want to describe what she was talking about.
I think the general theme was Kamala did nothing wrong, but America did.
And this will be the second opportunity that white women in this country have to change the way that they interact with the patriarchy. And, God bless Shannon Watts, who has tried to have that conversation.
What is the meme? It's no, it's not me. It's the children. It's the children who are wrong.
It's the
Oh, I love
it's the
that.
Latinos who are racist.
It's the Latinos who are racist.
Yeah, which Al Sharpton and Joe Scarborough, that they actually had a clip go viral, where they were both blaming Black men and Latino men for being misogynist and racist against Kamala, and that's why they didn't swing her way. So there's a lot of that.
I just say, Rev, really quickly, too. Democrats need to be mature, and they need to be honest. And they need to say, yes, there's misogyny. But it's not just misogyny from white men. Mm-hmm. It's misogyny from Hispanic men. Right. It's misogyny from black men, things we've all been talking about, who do not want a woman leading them.
It's just silly because we saw how Biden was doing, which was incredibly poorly. That's the reason that he dropped out of the race. It was like, yes, he has dementia, but it was the fact that Americans reacted to the dementia. They were like, we're not doing this. He was totally abysmal. And I don't know. It's silly to keep talking about it. How are we still talking about this specific kind of discourse in 2024?
Again, hopefully it's saving face, and the more extreme people are going to get kicked. They're going to get kicked out of the newsrooms.
I don't know. It's weird. I would think that it wouldn't be as bad, but then I've been looking at Facebook because I'm addicted to how unhinged everybody is right now. And it is just the things people are saying, and they're, women are like, go off your birth control, delete your apps, start paying for tampons in cash so that the government doesn't know when you're bleeding. We can share, Diva cups and truly. And I was asking my friends today, I'm like, what's really fascinating to me is like the different psychology of LARPing. Like the LARPing on the left is very like, Republicans aren't stopping in their cars and crying. They're more like, get your guns. They're coming for your guns. They're could stock up on your food supply and stop the steal. I was trying to think during 2020 what I was seeing from the right wing, the equivalent. And it's just so different on the left. It's just like unhinged, shaving their heads. This is not on the media level, but just on the individual level. And is it like these histrionics, and even at The View, they were crazy. Is it just we live in a time where hyperbole and histrionics get you a lot of attention? Or do they actually believe this? Because if you believe Trump is literally the next Hitler, then this reaction is somewhat appropriate. I don't know why you would have to film yourself doing it, but that's the appropriate reaction for believing this to be true. Or is it just like histrionics for engagement? I don't know. What do you guys think?
That's an interesting point where you have to just be loud enough to penetrate the noise, or to rise above the noise that it always exists online. So you have to take it to that level.
Have you been following Justine Bateman's feed on X?
No, tell me.
Oh my God. It's my favorite thing online right now. So she is basically critiquing all of these videos from the perspective of a filmmaker. It's like, she's like, bad lighting. You should shoot this way. The in the car is an overused location. It is just the best thing online right now is Justine Bateman she'll quote tweet Libs of TikTok, who's got all these videos that they're aggregating, obviously. And will just be like, it's so brilliant. It's just, she's just looking at it very rationally, like, here's what I would do if I was filming this.
I saw that one of the woman shaving her head, and it reminded me of that scene in V for Vendetta. And I thought, you guys live in a parallel dimension, unless it's just this, this internet thing. But then I saw another one that did not feel like internet performance to me that was much more frightening, which was a mom talking to her kids.
I was going to bring that one up.
That was fucking dark, man.
I haven't seen this one.
So it's a mom talking to her kids and she's breaking the news that Trump won. And then it's a little girl. It sounds like she's got to be like 7 or 8 and maybe 6 or 7, like young. And you hear her whimper and then start hyperventilating. And then you hear the dad in the background, like, you breathe. It's okay. You can breathe. And the mom's coaching her through, how everything's going to be fine. But the mom looks terrified, like she's, in a movie about the rise of Hitler and they have to change their lives because of it. And I thought, like, man, if your kid feels if your 7-year-old daughter knows anything has any kind of feeling about Donald Trump, whether she's fucking make America great again in class or terrified that he is, the Fifth Reich, that's child abuse. Okay. Like your kid should not know anything about this. And that is where I felt like this isn't just performance, because that kid's not faking it. That's a real reaction that I'm listening to, and it's really disturbing to me.
Yeah, that's really unsettling. I don't think you should be. I mean, the Make America Great Again, like, kids are going to pick that up from their parents. At least it's positive and optimistic. But, I think where the line is for me is when you're making your kid anxious and you're projecting your own anxiety onto your child. And there is a lot of this in the culture. So as someone who's a new mom, we were watching Inside Out 2, and then the 13-year-old girl has this panic attack and we're like, nope, turn it off. Like, why is a 13-year-old having this like insane panic attack? But there's so much of this just in the culture. And you saw it with the colleges where they were like, you guys can have a day, whatever, take whatever time you need there, and telling the students that instead of being resilient and just go to school, that it was okay if they skipped class and had some kind of meltdown in their cry closet.
That is for sure the other big thing here that's happening is there is a premium, like a kind of cultural premium placed on displays of anxiety and talking about, sicknesses that you're experiencing or conditions that you have. There is this, I don't know how to even describe it really. I just know that you get something out of it culturally by going through something and revealing that to people. You can feel that online, and you felt it throughout all of the social sort of revolutionary stuff we've seen over the last 5 years, but you also see it in social circles, among your friends and things like this, is people talking about. Go ahead.
That's strange. That is a counter trend to, Zoomers breaking for Trump by 30 points. I would expect. Zoomer men. Was it just men?
Well, as a generation, they broke a lot less, and I don't believe that women voted for Trump. I think they voted for Harris. It's only the Zoomer boys who voted for Trump, just by a lot.
But more Zoomer women than they thought voted for Trump. I think there were more Zoomer women than they expected voted, because there were a lot of women who were young Zoomers who were pro-Trump too. So I think there were more than they thought in the Zoomers, but the men, but this is again, this like crazy gender divide that's occurred and in this election, although it's, the suburban moms really came through and were like, no, because they care about the social things.
Yes. We should talk about that, by the way, really quickly before we move on. I would love your perspective, Bridget, on the 1619 Project woman, along with, it was Joy-Ann Reid and a lot of people we talked about before, but the 1619 Project woman went viral online for accusing.
Is she blaming white women?
Yes, of
we always get blamed.
Of voting on behalf of the ethno state. And I was just wondering, is that your like when you voted for Trump, was it because you were hoping for, you know, the ethno state?
When I was in the booth, I was like, for the ethno state, and then I pressed Trump. No, this happens though every election. I feel like I didn't realize this until I was very online. I'm like, well, let me guess, they're gonna blame white women again. It's like the rhetoric on the left around white women is can get very deranged. It's like and borderline like genocidal sometimes. And so I've kind of just learned to like brush it off. I feel like sometimes the only way to deal with it is to mock it. You know, my whole thing was during the whole like woke years or whatever we want to call them. I was like, don't give into it. Just tell them they're annoying. I had a whole expression like, you're not woke, you're annoying. It just minimize it by kind of mocking it. So I can't take it too seriously. She goes viral all the time for saying that. There is a lot of people who will say you're voting to, you know, keep, because we've internalized the patriarchy and we are invested in maintaining power, when it's really like, no, I don't want my little girl to be in a spa with a dude. I don't want to pay 4 times what I was paying for groceries. My insurance has gone up. People don't know how many women are in charge of running the house in terms of finances, paying the bills. Like, we see all of this stuff on a line by line basis. And like, women are going to be mad if they can't get Botox because they have to pay more for groceries. I'm sorry. Not just Botox, but it's like, and all jokes aside, suburban women are, they're balancing a lot of things. You know, I had a great conversation with Mary Catherine Ham on my, one of my 2 podcasts. And we were like, are suburban women going to break for Trump? Because everyone in our circles, it was anecdotal, but we were all in group chats and everybody was like, so we're all going to vote for Trump, huh? Like, yeah, we're going to do this. And every woman, I have a very politically homeless subscriber base. Every single one of those women shockingly broke for Trump. And these are libertarians. They're RFK Jr. people who have never voted Republican. So when I started seeing that trend, I was like, holy shit, he really might win. You know, he might take this, because and again, it was like, well, maybe these are just my circles, but I think suburban women were balancing these things of, you know, abortion, pro-choice, and all of the other stuff we've talked about. And clearly, we know which direction they voted. I don't think they were all like, this is for the ethno state.
Yeah, it's like they really think that like suburban women want some kind of white Wakanda. Is that what they think? I don't, but I actually don't. I think they look at you guys. I think they look at you guys and they think, I can bully them. I can bully them into voting the way that I want them to. And they can't do that with like a Zoomer white boy with a broccoli cut. You're not bullying him into voting the way that you want him to vote. They're outside in front of the frat house doing the Trump dance right now. Like, there's no path. There's no path. So it's like, they got to go to you.
Part of my most, part of the reason I put that video out before the election of why I voted for Trump was because my most sexist but scientifically backed position is that women do need more social permission to do something that isn't popular. This goes back to just our safety and our DNA. It's very scary to be outside of a tribe for men and women, particularly for women. You're not protected. It's very dangerous. It's in our life-saving response that we have. And women, as we've seen by many of these contagions in the past, they just generally tend to do things in social circles and you know, egg each other on, or like a lot of the things that are for good and for bad. And I think women in those group chats and having people like Heather Haying came out and said she was voting for Trump. I think even men reached out to me and said, "Oh, I saw your video and I was on the fence, and it kind of helped me just go, okay, this isn't, it's not like the death of everything if I do this." And women, I think women just, there was like the suburban mom, secret vote that I think was happening in the group chats. And I was wondering if it was, I think it came to bear out.
We saw a piece of this in tech, obviously, in a huge way, with just, you have people like, David Sachs coming out very strongly. Obviously, Peter started it, but he was demonized at first. Now you have years of antibodies built up. David Sachs comes out. You have different people on the All In podcast who come out. Other huge or just like reasonably popular VCs come out in support of this. And it was just like a snowball effect. And once there was social, like you said, permission to go, it was way, way, way more people. Let's talk about your video. So that's interesting. I didn't realize that was the reason that you did it. I think that's really interesting. Were you surprised? I was surprised to see how much pushback you got. Were you surprised to see how much pushback you got from really this contingent of like centrist, libertarian, self-proclaimed heterodox, literally self-proclaimed heterodox thinkers? Like imagine like sort of maybe the IDW adjacent crowd, people who work in institutions like the Atlantic, for example, but want to seem free thinking, and they were really mad at you for this. What was up with that?
I mean, I did the video for a lot of reasons. One was I had been very public about my being on the fence, and then it would have felt shady to just keep it to myself, or I don't know. I feel my whole thing is just being honest with everyone, but my audience in particular. And I expected blowback. There's a lot of people in that faction. I see what they say about me. I've seen it. They've been waiting to call me a female Dave Rubin, and they have been waiting for this moment for, 6 to 8 years where they can just say, "Ha, we got you," because I have slowly, as they would say, been moving to the right. I think that becoming a mom radicalized me in ways that I explained in my video, where I had a child and suddenly I couldn't be like a Gen Xer just like sitting on the sidelines being like, you guys all have to care so much. That sucks. I'm like, oh shit. Now I've got to like care about who's on the school board and whether like the Montessori teacher has pronouns in their bio. Okay. I guess I've got to fight. And that was something new. So these things and just having people tell me that what wasn't happening. When I first got caught in the crossfire of the culture wars, knowing nothing, being a waitress, trying to be a comedian, got sober in 2013, stumbled into it in 2015. And then slowly in 2016, started pushing back very early against the insanity on the left, but was still being at Playboy. I heard from the right all the time about how feminism destroyed America, and I was the reason that this country was collapsing, and et cetera. So I was like, I don't trust you guys either. And they opened their tent up much more over the years. But someone said to me, "It's not what you're saying." I was like, why does everyone think I'm on the right? And they said, "It's not what you're saying, it's what you're not saying." And I think about that a lot, because that is audience capture. Because I started saying, when I would pause to say something and found myself hesitating, I would be like, oh, this is going to get me kicked out of my left-wing circle of friends. And then I just started, my whole mantra on Twitter is fuck it, send tweet. Like there's not very clearly, there's not much of a pause or now X. And then I feel like if there's something that I felt like would alienate my new audience and I wasn't going to send it or say it, I'm falling prey to the same thing. And it's very hard you have to kind of, I feel like my audience now has a pretty high immune system to me not really being sure where I'm going to fall. Even just in a video I did yesterday, I was like, guys, I'm not MAGA. I'm not going to be like, we started Dumpster Fire in the Trump years, making fun of Trump. We are going to continue to do that because it's hilarious, but we'll also, it's like equal opportunity. So I was expecting this from that heterodox community. I think some of their criticisms aren't entirely wrong, but I do, I try to see like the good faith people, but not all of them are really operating in good faith. That's when they lose me.
It was is her name Kathy or something? I think she's like Ukrainian,
Yeah.
maybe. What is her name?
Kathy Young.
Yeah, that one went after you, and it seemed personal to me. And
Yeah, it felt personal.
And then it was on the heels of the Atlantic piece by Thomas Chatterton, whatever. And that piece was wild to me. To have a piece, the piece was the problem with heterodox voting for Trump, heterodox people voting for Trump. It was like, how could this be happening? It was a whole piece on sort of exploring that. And I just think if you're a self-proclaimed heterodox thinker and you have a problem with someone not voting for the Democrat, you have to do some soul searching. Like, you have to look in the mirror and ask yourself many things. I think the first one is like, why am I publicly calling myself a heterodox thinker? And I'm not even saying necessarily because you're wrong, but also it's very cheesy, I think, to say that and to call yourself that.
Yeah. I didn't even know what that word meant until like 2 years ago.
Obsessed with it. And it's like, if you have a heterodox platform, you're not fucking heterodox. Like, what are we talking? You're not the contrarian that you think you are. You are just in the machine and you want to be liked. And it's like, you are just an Atlantic writer, voting Democrat who happens to also agree that children shouldn't be chemically castrated. Well, guess what? You don't get a trophy for that position. That is just like a normal, but you're not like a brave, edgy, contrarian thinker because you think we should not be chemically castrating children. That's not enough for me. You have to be open to people exploring different ideas. And I think that, Bridget, what you did, it's hard to go out publicly and brand yourself with a candidate. And I think it was cool that you did it. And I think, like, fuck them for going after you for something.
But it felt good to take a stand, honestly. I didn't vote for anybody in 2020. And it felt good to be, because now that was why I voted for him. I felt so much cognitive dissonance between, I want him to win, but I can't vote for him. So I had to really interrogate that. Well, why can't I vote for him? Is it character? A lot of people have squared that. They wanted him to win, but they couldn't vote for him. I couldn't square it. I was like, just pull the lever and then own it. And now I have to own that vote. And I don't know. It actually was much easier than I thought. It's for all of I don't know, that like heterodox, that's very strange too, because that kind of smug disappointment only works in one direction. Like, why shouldn't I be disappointed in you for voting for Kamala?
Right.
That is like a very strange mentality where it only comes in one direction.
Yeah. What does she even believe? How, as a self-proclaimed thinker of any kind, can you tolerate someone without positions? That's crazy. And I think they would follow. I've noticed when they make these arguments, they tend to fall down on the side of like, well, this is an existential election because Donald Trump tried to do a coup or something. And I just don't believe that. Sorry. I just like don't think that's what happened. And I don't think it was that. I think that it was a riot. I think riots are bad. I think he was a buffoon about the entire thing and has made like a lot of mistakes in the things that he said. But I do not believe that this is a man who's actually trying to seize control of the country and some kind of dictatorship. And when you poll the average American who has followed that story, who is a Trump supporter, they're not a Trump supporter because they think he's going to be a dictator. They're a Trump supporter because they know that he's not. And that's just something that people who hate him say. And they really just want a border, and they really just want crime to be illegal again, and they really just can't stand the woke shit. And like the fact that racism became so normalized over the last handful of years, like that's the kind of stuff that they're voting on. And I think it's really intellectually dishonest of the other team. I think it's fine to not vote for Trump. I think it's fine to hate Trump. I understand. Dan, I understand where they're coming from. I do understand it. I understand even voting for Kamala. What I do not understand is for them to go and try and demonize people who disagree with them in this way, especially coming from the position of these free thinkers. And that's also what activates me, I think, on the tech side, when you have like Vinod Khosla or Paul Graham, these kinds of people who are, they're not satisfied. Reid Hoffman is another one. People who are not satisfied in just, disagreeing with you publicly or voting for Kamala and giving money to Kamala, though they've done all of those things. But they want to go and say, they take it a step further and they say, you're a bad person for doing this. this is immoral. And that's this kind of shaming tactic where you can feel someone trying to control the Overton window. They're reaching for it and they're trying to tighten their grip around it so they don't even have to make an argument in favor of their candidate. You socially are not permitted to disagree with them. And that's the kind of thing that I resist all the time, because that's the kind of thing that fucked us in 2020.
COVID.
That is the thing all throughout COVID. That is the thing that crippled our country, and that scarred me. Scarred is maybe the wrong word. I learned a lesson that I will never forget. And I will never, ever, ever, ever back down on those things ever again. It's just way too important.
I think I learned that lesson too. And I think a lot of Americans did, though. And that's why you saw that their immunity was much higher to being shamed for this kind of vote than it was in 2020 even. I mean, I want to see the numbers of how many first-time Trump voters there were from people who either never voted for him or voted, I'm curious about those numbers when it's all tallied up.
The righteousness, like the moral righteousness aspect of shaming people into voting, is that like a novel? That's like a relatively recent thing in politics, right? Like, I don't know. I mean, when did that start? Because like in the 70s is where I think identity politics really got going in the United States, with like the Weather Underground and Black Panthers and all that. But I don't know that you saw that, reflecting on people's their voting choices. Like that wasn't part of the conversation. And it was just like purely like, vote based on your own interests, et cetera. And I wonder, I guess my question is like, is that novel now? And if so, I think that would be a good sign, because it seems like it's on its way out. I think maybe America kind of woke up to that, and sort of like, it's just like, no, like we're not being browbeaten into voting for an abstract concept that the left essentially wants us to vote for. We're actually just going to vote for the things that we want to happen.
I think that's wishful thinking. It's not on its way out. And that's because, someone, Power Bottom Dad on Twitter, it's a great account. Give him a follow. Power Bottom Dad said, Trump just won the election, which means, and everyone seems to agree, and I still feel scared to post about my support for Trump on Twitter. Mm-hmm. And that's because, and I commented and I said, that's because you're correctly intuiting the shape of power in America. Power in America is basically unelected. It's almost entirely Democrat. It occupies like every fount of power. Like we're talking bureaucratic power. We're talking the power in Hollywood. We're talking the power in the press, though that's shifting now with the alternative media ecosystem. We were talking the power all throughout tech until recently. And now I think it's really just tech leadership that's not on that side of things. But all throughout business and money, banking, these are places that are overwhelmingly Democrat. And so even if it's not, your elected official is a Republican, you feel social pressure to, if you are a Republican or you're going to vote for a Republican, to at least not talk about it. And I think that will persist for as long as Democrats have so much power in the country, all these other, seats of power. That's just us. That's evolution. That is us knowing how to survive in a group, but just by being aware of who's in charge. And you feel it like the hairs raising on the back of your neck. Like, when your side is not in power. And that's why I find so many of these conversations about, who is in power and who's not. And people are like, oh, I was nervous to say that I didn't vote for Trump. I'm like, no, you fucking weren't, because we all know, know what the correct vote was and what the bad vote was. And it's just very frustrating to me to have to pretend otherwise.
It's crazy how few like actual critical postmortems you see from the left, rather than shaming Trump supporters or blaming all white women. Like one of the few that I did see was Bernie Sanders. And it makes sense that he would be the one calling them out, because where Democrats clearly lost the most is where Bernie was the strongest when he ran. It's like he thrived in the Joe Rogan podcast environment. Like he was strong with Latinos. He had a group called Bernie Bros because he was so strong with young men. And other Democrats like gave him shit for promoting his Rogan endorsement in the past, but like
they gave him shit
if Democrats want to,
they called it misogynistic.
Yes. Yeah. And
they called him like a Nazi adjacent for going on the podcast at the time.
Insane. Yeah. And if Democrats wanted to like actually learn from the landslide, they would listen more to the candidate who thrived on Rogan, rather than listen to the cable TV talking heads who blamed it all on racism.
Yeah. I do think Elon gave a lot of permission too. And like those young Gen Zers, people don't realize, I have nephews that age. They grew up with all this stuff in high school. Like they were the generation that had all of the tone policing and thought policing and the wokeism really. And they were being told that they were evil and racist because of the way that they were born. And these guys have definitely reacted to it. It's kind of made the MAGA movement the counterculture because it's like the punk rock for these guys. And I think they all they're really into crypto. They grew up online and they really look up to guys like Elon. So Elon coming out in support of Trump, for that younger generation, older people might have kind of been like, oh, whatever. And people have all these opinions, but the younger guys were like, he's like their hero.
Yeah, that resonates with me. I've always had the Zoomer male vote swinging so far to the right was completely unsurprising for me because I've always had this model based on my own experience growing up of like when I grew up, basically the sort of Christian evangelical right was the scary cultural force.
Same.
And they always kind of looming, threatening to take over in some way or another politically and culturally. And I remember, in high school thinking like understanding their positions and just thinking like these guys are fucking lame, like they're just totally lame, prudish people. And I want to do something to offend them. Like that was my instinct, right? Like I want to buck that authority. And the left looks exactly like that. And I think as a young boy, 12 to 16 years old, all you want to do is show that type of person that like they're like fake and gay, right? Or something like that, right? Like
retarded and gay.
You don't retarded you want to shock that person because they're so prudish, they're so closed off.
Yeah.
And I really resonate with what you just said.
It's a powerful force, the teenage boy, but when awoken, and it doesn't tend to involve itself directly in politics, but when awoken, it is mighty, as we are now learning. The last bit here I wanted to just touch on pretty briefly was we've covered the election and the ins and outs of it, the cultural piece of it, how it happened, what we think was happening. I guess it's like what comes next out of this. You have a handful of people who are at least saying they think Trump is going to, this is our last election, democracy's over, he's an authoritarian, and that's that. I mean, that's silly. We know that that's not true unless, and then, oops, my bad. I will come back and apologize if that's on me. Here's
the thing though, Mike, I will say the people who stood up against all of this stuff, like all along against the overreach and COVID and vax mandates, these people who have suddenly come right and they voted for Trump, I believe we're still the same people who are going to stand up if whoops, we're wrong and he's, literally Hitler. Like we're not, it's certainly not going to be the people that have been quietly just going along the whole time. I don't trust them to stand up to anything. So I at least trust that the weird realignment coalition of people and thinkers, they are the people who have been pushing back against all of this stuff all along.
I agree. Yeah. I think, what is the word in the, there's the personality quality that means that you don't get along with people. Disagreeable. It's a disagreeable group. And, and that is, it is like a kind of inoculation against really crazy shit. And
contrarianism.
But it's like, what is next? Is it, is RFK going to be making French fries great again with beef tallow? Is Elon's Doge a real thing? High speed rail with beautiful bar carts cutting through the Rockies and getting me from SF to New York in a night. I won't hold my breath. Will the moon finally be a state? I don't know. Questions for you guys. And then I will just start though with, as of today we record on Thursday, so this comes out on Friday. So as of Thursday, I did see Trump making some statements on some executive orders that he plans to make. And so before we get into your last minute predictions or last predictions, Riley, what did you read about? I only saw the immigration one, but what else is he promising now?
Yeah, he's also making some like announcing some possible administration appointments. One of them I saw was a popular like regenerative agriculture guy who is getting an appointment to the USDA, which I'm sure will make the Amish very happy, which is so funny, by the way, that's like one of his voting blocks now. But and he's also been announcing some proposed executive orders. He put out a video saying that on day one, he's going to end birthright citizenship in America. Saying that the future children of illegal aliens will no longer automatically receive U.S. citizenship. And in a separate video, he said he'll sign an order ceasing gender-affirming care for minors. So he said there, I will sign a new executive order instructing every federal agency to cease all programs that promote the concept of sex and gender transition at any age. So it seems to be sort of like a stark contrast from the first Trump administration, which reportedly was like a lot of scrambling and not really having a set agenda. This time it seems that he clearly has a plan in place to like enact his agenda on day one.
Well, you see that. I mean, I saw on the immigration thing already, people are freaking out about it, of course, because they freak out about everything that he does. This is a very popular position. It is a kind of a common sense position. You don't get birthright citizenship in like all throughout the old world. This is a new world, North America, South America thing. And it makes sense because you had to populate these new continents, especially America. You had to populate in Canada, you had to populate the country and build the country, and citizenship just worked differently. But you don't have this in Europe. You don't have this anywhere in Asia. You don't have this in most of the African countries. But on the fact that he's, and maybe you guys can disagree on that position or whatever, I'm very much in favor. I think that you do not just automatically get citizenship because you were born here. Otherwise, there are all these obvious incentives, which he's trying to kill, which is like, why wouldn't you just come here and have a kid who can then have citizenship? But citizenship, immigration certainly was one of the main reasons that he was elected. And the other one, I think you saw this in places like Virginia, and I think it was Loudoun County, where you had this huge swing away from the Democrats, where this is a Democrat stronghold. And I think the Democrats might have actually taken it, but it was really close, and it had to do with this topic specifically. This is really an important topic to parents across the country. So you can be mad about it, and you can be mad about immigration, but the overwhelming majority of Americans are on the same page here. And I think that he's going to basically just be doing stuff like that, stuff that most people actually agree with, even if it's not, I don't know, popular on Threads.
I love that you're on Threads.
You got to check Threads once in a while.
I'm fascinated with the host strike. That's what I'm just.
What's the host? Oh, the women who are saying they're not going to have sex with Trump supporters or have sex at all. Is it?
I've been just calling it the host strike, but yeah, I think it's the 4B.
Because they're not getting abortion. Movement? It's weird though to be like, because I can't have an abortion, I'm not having sex. It's like, that's what the Christians want you to do. You know that, right? Like they got you. They got you, girl. They won.
That's what's so funny. Everyone on the right is like, oh, good. We managed to convince them to not have like promiscuous sex too. What a win for us.
What do you have any, I mean, do you think the host strike grows? Do you think it becomes a national emergency?
I think it's just the like movement for attention, right? There was a really funny video going around, and it was like the Norway, Sweden, and it was like, ladies, welcome. You can go to these countries where there's the 12. They too have a 12-week abortion ban or something.
Yes, yeah, we have the most permissive abortion laws. I think maybe Canada was. But it's like, yeah, like they have the exact abortion ban that I think makes sense. Like it's like it's like it's a reasonable number, and then after that number, it's if the mom's life is in danger, that's really sad, and we should allow it there as well. And that seems good. That seems reasonable. That seems fine. The music, that was it. Matt, you should play that clip if you can find it. Someone said it was like the top so far for cringy post-election content.
Oh, really?
But I don't know about that yet. The woman talking to her kids was pretty wild. The hair cutting one was pretty wild.
Everyone going Britney Spears. That's
what do you guys think? Strange. So last thoughts, predictions for the way things are going to play out over the next couple months.
Well, I'm looking, I don't know. I have to try and be humble. I definitely feel that urge to like get drunk on liberal tears. I don't, it's not great. It's not great. It feels like a character defect. And I do think you have to, like, the urge to kind of dunk on your opponents it's not good sportsmanship, even though it's funny. So I hope that, and I do try to remember that a lot of these people are really suffering, and the Democrats have like preyed on a vulnerable population of young people, and they are psychologically not doing well. So I predict a lot more histrionics online. I don't know though. Are there any protests? Like, remember 2016 with the like pussy hats and stuff?
Yeah, I saw one. I was just telling this to the guys before you hopped on. It was in Chicago, and it felt so lackluster. It felt like they were LARPing the LARP of a 2020 protest, and I just don't think they have it in them for another #resist moment. I think that they're tired. They want to move on. I was in LA for an election party, and so that night I was at a restaurant, and before I went to the party, and nobody fucking cared. Nobody was talking about it. Everybody was laughing and drinking, and I was checking my phone relentlessly to see what was happening. No one had their phone out. It was just pure bliss. The next morning after the election, I went to breakfast. The same no one cared. Everyone was just going about their day. I think that's what also the press was most nervous about, was they know that this is going to be very different than 2016, where there was so much energy behind stopping anything from happening. Now Trump is not clueless, and the average American, if not basically on board with most of his platform positions, just doesn't care anymore and wants to stop thinking about it. I think that he'll probably just be effective, and it'll be fine. But also, I predict this election would be boring before the first assassination attempt. So, I mean, I've been wrong before. Bridget, what were you saying?
Another weird phenomenon, and I'm interested to hear from your listeners or from you guys. A lot of people, like liberals, secretly have reached out to me and been like, "I'm glad he won." Even people who voted for, because they felt like they had to. This is a very strange 3-day later phenomenon that I've been experiencing from people who didn't vote at all or didn't vote for him, have been like, "I'm glad he won."
So I went golfing with my buddy who's from Vegas, and again I live in LA, and it was over the weekend before the election, and he wore a MAGA hat.
Wow.
And I was like, oh, okay, like, because this is a really popular golf course, tons of people around. You're always talking to people because, like, you might be they're behind you and in front of you, golfing, and it was like totally fun. Like, we were talking to everybody was great. Nobody batted an eyelash as far as I could see.
Yeah.
And there's very conspicuous, the hat, and so I don't know.
I know a guy, a friend of mine, went out in New York with the MAGA hat, and same thing happened. Like, nothing, no one gave him any problems at all, and actually he got a lot of support, like throughout the street from like all kinds of people. I think that you can just look at the election map, and probably what's happening is, it's like, I mean, Trump won for a reason, and and I don't know. Yeah, I don't see the protests happening. Or though, I mean, again, though, I'm wrong quite a lot. Riley,
it's going to be a blue J6 on J6 or whatever day it is.
They're just going to have a knitting sit-in. What is that going to look like?
It's like Legos, a tent for Legos, Starbursts.
Riley, last thoughts on the Zoomer perspective. What do you think, that it stays strong? Is this here to stay? Do they swing back? Do they fade away? Are they over it? Was this like a one-time thing? What's going on there?
I think continue the podcast strategy, and it's only gonna continue. I think Brandon was right. Like, young people always want to rebel against their parents, and their parents have been, the school marmy people on Twitter telling you what you can't say. So I think as long as that continues, the Zoomer to the right trend is also going to continue.
Bridget, I'm going to give you the last word as our guest. Anything, I don't know. What do you think about, it could be anything, the reaction to your coming out video, reaction to the election, prediction for the future?
I'm really worried about the young women. Like that, I as much as it's funny to watch all these videos, my big takeaway from this as someone who was a young woman in their 20s and teens is I want to find a way to reach them and try and deprogram them a little bit from a lot of the fear mongering and give them some psychological resilience. And, you know, I feel like this generation of women, they feel very lost and unhinged to me. And it's, and nobody seems interested in help. You know, it's easy this was my kind of issue with the right wing when I said they have a young woman problem, because it's like, and I guess I can include myself in that now, which is weird. There's like this dunking on them isn't going to bring them over. You know, it's like going after a woman who's in an abusive relationship for not getting out soon enough. So I do feel like part of the work that I want to do and that I hope women in this space do is trying to reach across the aisle and mentor and help some of these women so that they're not all in psych wards in 5 years.
Seems like you kind of I mean, this is what your video strategy was. I think that you just need social protection in some way. You got to, and you're doing that. I think it's really cool. I think it was really smart. I've never thought about it from that position before. And I would love to live in a world where the women of this country are slightly less crazy. I shouldn't say that. Most of them are great. Honestly, and I say this to like some of the most base people I know are like the women in my life. Like there's the reason I am the way that I am is like my mother, my sister, like they're the ones who did this to me. So, you know, they're out there. It's just like probably the craziest ones get the most attention. And for reasons I don't understand. Bridget, thank you for coming on the pod. You are the best. Thank you for also Hereticon, which we didn't even talk about, but one of these days.
Thank you for having me.
It was awesome. You guys,
so much fun.
Have a great one. Go touch grass this weekend and see you here next week.